hunger.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining me on today's edition of Glen's Retro Show. Today I wanted to... What? Hi everybody, thank you for joining me on today's edition of Glen's Retro Show. My friend over here, Reaper, he was a little mad at me because he couldn't find any of these really neat little tiny arcades. Actually, he only found one. But if you do see these are great. You can get them over at Cracker Barrel, Toys R Us, GameStop, a lot of other places. Currently, I have Miss Pac-Man, Galaxian, Space Invaders, and Pac-Man. They're about $20 each, and they're really great fun. Now, he was only able to pick up one, and he was mad at me because I didn't get him any. But he was able to find Space Invaders. So today on Glen's Retro Show, I'm going to show you how to turn this one game into all four. Let's go see how it's done. Come on.
Run, coward.
Okay, so the hardest part of the modification, well, there's actually two parts. One is these are small, so that's already one thing that makes it a little bit difficult, but the soldering pads are small as well. But let's get started. Overall, it's a quick and easy modification. Just be careful with your soldering iron. So you can see here's one of the tiny arcades I'm going to be working on. Had an extra Space Invaders, and you can see I got a 4-position little dip switch module here. Now, if you come onto the again the Tiny Arcades fan page, some people are using rotary switches and all other kinds of cool modifications, including Bruce Yeager, who actually turned one of these into a tabletop. Yes, he converted this into a little micro tabletop. Let's have a look. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be putting this little switch somewhere on the back of this Tinycade. And the hardest part, again, is just the soldering part of it. You will need a file to file out some of the plastic back of the unit here, but it's not too much. You can see it's not a very large switch, but again, just take your time because you can always take away the plastic. You can't really put it back, although again, some of the forum members have found little putties that you could put on to if you do make a mistake to fix it. But overall, just take your time and it'll come out great. So here is the back of the Tinycade. Your on-off switch, and inside here are 3 AAA batteries, which we're going to take out in a moment. And I decided to put my switch, where most forum members have decided to put it, was inside the keychain area. Now, if you really wanted to keep your keychain, some forum members have actually put it over in this area. But and it looks fine. But I agree. I think I liked it up here, and I don't really use it as a keychain, so that's where I decided to put it. So again, I removed my 3 AAA batteries here, took out the screw, and there's just 2 screws up here. 1, 2 we're going to remove, and if you can see right here and here, there's a little plastic notch that you have to just pry this open just ever so gently on each side to allow this door to come off. You can see I use a little plastic extraction tool just to pry it open just enough to pop these. You can use a small screwdriver, but again, be careful because the plastic could scratch, and if you're like me, you don't want that to happen. So once you take the unit apart, you can see there's just 2 wires you have to desolder temporarily, here and here for your battery terminal, and they're marked, so you know that the red's going to go here and the black's going to go here. You won't make that mistake when you're putting it back together. Here's your main board, and again, if you're not too good at soldering, I would recommend removing all the screws and pulling this board out. I did not. I simply moved the wires out of the way. and this is where we're concerned about. This is your A, B, C, and D. So this is Space Invaders. So you can see on D, if I zoom in here a little bit, there's a little tiny resistor on here. This 000 resistor is basically just a wire. It doesn't do anything, so it's acting just like a regular wire and jumping these two pads. So these are your game ROM pads, basically your positive, and these are your ground. Now, Charles Tweedy from the Obtanium Gaming channel decided, and I agreed with him, was to put the negative, instead of going to one of these pads, to go to the speaker negative over here. So we're going to attach 1, 2, 3, 4 wires here for the game ROMs, but our negative is going to go up here to the speaker, just to make it easier and not deal with these tiny pads. Again, I pulled these wires out of the way, but if you're not delicate, there's not a lot of room in here. So if you're not too good with the soldering iron, I would recommend removing the whole board and doing the soldering outside and then putting the board back in. Here's just another shot again. You can see the pads a little bit better here if the camera's more in focus, but we're not going to deal with the negative here. We're going to deal with the A, B, and C, D over in this area to select our games. So again, if you're looking here, there's not a lot of room. If you're not good with the soldering iron, and even if you are, you have to take great care. You can see the soldering iron is not only hot at the tip, but it's hot all the way up here. And you might be working over here okay and not realizing this is nailing here. And anyone who's a subscriber to my channel knows I've definitely done that. Fortunately, it's always been in a spot that's not too conspicuous. But I've definitely done it. So if you have any concerns about that, I mean, it's not a lot of money, it's 20 bucks, but still, you spend 20 bucks, you don't want to ruin it. So just take your time, and if you feel like you need to, pull the board out. It's not hard. And you can see here is the back panel completely removed, your positive red wire, your negative black wire. So it's very easy to put these things back together. And you can see here is the dip switch we're going to use. Again, I'm going to put mine up in here, in this area right here. And we zoom in a little bit. Basically, you're going to come all the way up to this line right here, and all the way down to this line here. And you have to cut a little bit more on the sides as well. Again, some people have put it in this area here and kept their keychain intact. Other people, if you come to the Tiny Arcade Facebook group, you'll see some people have actually put in a rotary switch here. I was not too much of a fan of that, only because it sticks out so far. I like the more flush of these little dip switches. But the negative to this is, you can see how tiny these are. You can use your finger, but a paper clip or something makes it easier, or a pencil. Where the rotary knob, it's very easy to turn. So it's just really your own preference. Now, again, people like Charles Tweedy from Obtanium Gaming actually found a dip switch with larger fingers that come out. But again, I want it to be, you know, something I can change, but not too obvious when you weren't Again, I just didn't want to make mine too obvious on the back. I wanted to keep it more stock, or stock looking as best I could. So here's the area we're going to work in right here. Again, we're going to come all the way up to this lip right here, and down to this lip right here. And you're going to have to widen it a little bit as well. And here's the file that I did use. And just take your time. Again, it's much easier to take away than to put back. Again, I want to shout out Charles Tweedy again from Obtanium Gaming, who found a putty you can put in that'll try and make the plastic look better if you do mess up. But I'd rather not make the mistake and just take your time and file it out. It took me maybe about 20 minutes to really get this thing filed out nice and easy and smooth the way I wanted it. You can see it's not quite done yet, but it's close. But you can see I'm coming right down to this lip here and up here. Now, some people actually have the switch sticking out far. I didn't want that. I kept mine recessed inside. I didn't see any real difference in how hard it was to move the dip switches, whether it was out or in. So I preferred it in behind versus coming out. It's held in just fine with the hot glue. And again, I just prefer it to look as more stock as I can make it. And you can see right here, we're getting ready to solder on our wires. I already pulled off the jumper right here. Basically, you definitely want to have some liquid flux. If you can, some non-cleanup liquid flux. And I just put some flux on here, touch the soldering iron, and the little resistor just slid right off. And then what you want to do is, again, put down flux again, and I put a smidgen more solder on these pads just to give me some room to work with when I was getting ready to put on my my wires. Now, when you're working with this little dip switch that I'm using right here, the 4 position, this will be your A, B, C, and D ROM. But your ground, you're going to bend these all together because you don't need 1 wire. You don't need to wire 8 wires. We can wire 5. So you can see here, I simply bent all these together. I put on some flux, and I'm going to solder these all together. Here's just another angle. You can see I just basically bended them all together, put some flux on it, and I'm going to put on a blob of solder. I don't have to be neat with this part. It just has to make sure they're all connected. You can see it's just a big solder blob on that side. It doesn't really matter. And just another angle. You can see this is one of the few times where bridging is just fine on your ground. You don't want to make these bridged at all, but here, not a problem. And basically I used an old IDE cable, an old hard drive cable. Floppy drive cable would work as well. What I do is, you can see right here, I take a black magic marker just so I know which side is my number 1 wire, which I went to ground with. And then my A, B, C, and D wires were soldered on right here. Again, it's not the best. My camera's not the best at getting close. But just make sure there's no bridging. None of these are touching. Otherwise, it's not going to boot up properly. Another angle down here. Solder. And again, flux. Put flux on here. Put some solder on the wires. And then put some solder on the pins. And then flux again to make them connect. That flux really does help with drawing in the solder and making sure you get a good solid connection on here. These wires are very susceptible to heat. So just make sure you do it quick. If you hold the soldering iron too long, you can see the wire starts to melt up, and it'll keep going as long as you hold that soldering iron on. Here's the next thing you want to be concerned about. Again, make sure there's no bridging here when you put the solder on. Now I did it this way just because I'm weird that way. It might be easier to make the wires go this way. You might want to put down a piece of tape, Teflon tape, electrical tape, something on this side, just so you don't hit ground. When I first did it, galaxian kept coming up. So what happened was when I touched the solder, the pin came over and melted the wire just far enough to where I was getting contact on one of these, and it kept loading galaxian. So I had to take the wire off. I shortened it and put it back on. But you might want to go this way, bring your wires in this way. This way you lessen the chance of doing that. But I always seem to do things the hard way. And you can see up here is my negative ground wire to the speaker terminal. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 wires soldered on here, and my last is going to my ground. Again, just double check. You don't want to have any bridges anywhere. Another angle, you want to check all the spots. Solder's over here. You can see there's no bridging between any of these right here, and I'm good on the back. Initially I was having a problem on B, but I took care of that and the issue went away. But I would recommend putting down some Teflon tape, electrical tape, something over here, just so you don't have any problems with it at all. And you might want to put down, again, once you've tested everything, put a little dab of hot glue, just to make sure these wires don't get pulled off the solder traces. Now you can see here, I was just about done doing my filing. I did a little bit more on top, but I put mine recessed. Some people have this sticking out here, or you have the rotary knob here, but I liked mine sitting behind there, and I think it looks really, really good. I'm still able to hit the buttons, the dips up and down, no problem. The hot glue will hold it in place really nice. It won't be like it's going to fall in. And you can see it's nice and flush. I had to, on this curved part, I had to flatten it on the inside to make sure it sat flush. But it turns out that there's a little notch on the side of the dip switch here that kind of locked it in place. So I was kind of happy about that. And you can see it's nice and smooth. There's no gaps in here anywhere. And you can see it's sitting in just so nice. It's being held in by itself. And I just put a little dab of hot glue up here and then put a bunch of hot glue around the back just to make sure the switch stayed in place. And you can see what I did here. I did have to flatten these out a little bit just to make sure it sat flush in the notch and held it in place. And just another angle. You can see just hot glue. This will hold it in place just fine. And then once I had everything tested, I did put some hot glue on here as well to make sure none of these wires came off. It's okay if the wire goes in front of this. This is your screw for your battery door, so that's not going to anything inside here. And then basically just fold your wire in place and put it back in, and you'll be all set to go. Again, you want to double check, triple check your wires over here. We look good, we look good. You want to do the same thing over here and test it before you close it up, although it's not hard to open again. But why have to open it again. Just test it, make sure everything's good. And of course, don't forget you have to reattach your positive and negative terminal. You can see all my wires here are good. There's no solder bridging at all. And then it's just basically pick your game. 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, if they're all down like this, the Tiny Arcade will go into a test mode, which is kind of nice. You can test your joystick and your fire buttons and your screen. So it's just a nice extra feature putting in one of these little dip switches. And you can see this little notch right here kind of helped to lock it into the side of the plastic, which was kind of nice. It's a shame. I did order a bunch of black dip switches. They haven't arrived yet. This will probably look even better with just the white selection and white lettering, but the rest of this being all black. And that'll be my next one I modify. And again, make sure everything's good. You reattach your battery terminals, and that's really it. You are done. It's time to close this little bad boy back up. So again, it's not a very hard or lengthy tutorial. Just because of the size of the Tiny Arcade, if you're leaving the components inside doing the work, you just have to make sure you're very careful with your soldering iron. If you are concerned about that, just pull everything out. It's not hard. And you'll have not just one, but you'll have all 4 games running in each Tiny Arcade, which is pretty awesome. See, everything looks great, easy selection, and I thank you for watching, taking time out of your day to see this tutorial. Again, if you are a subscriber, thank you so much. I really appreciate all my subscribers. You guys are great. And if you're not yet, please do consider subscribing to my channel, Glen's Retro Show. And also, don't forget to look me up on Facebook on Glen's Retro Show Game Gurus, or come to the Tiny Arcade fan page. Hope to see you guys soon.
Okay.
Sit, Blue Blue, sit. Good dog.
where I live.